Ricky, thank you so much for being here today, and I'm just so excited to talk to you.
Well, I am too. I appreciate you and the friendship that we have and the ministry we have together.
So the first time we met was in 2012, or maybe a little before 2012, when we were planning to go down to the Amazon in 2012.
Right.
And I remember my daughter and I came to that first meeting, and I had never been on an international trip before, and I got to be honest, I was pretty frightened.
I can tell.
So I did not know what to expect, and I really didn't understand why I was there, besides being a father for my daughter and making sure she didn't get hurt or something else. And so I think that was the first time we met, was at that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And you had been leading numerous trips down there. How at that point, how many years had you been down there, Ricky?
If that was in 2012, that'd have been 13 years.
Oh my!
Yeah, I worked on the boat.
The very first boat.
I was on the maiden voyage of the very first trip. I put the water filter system in the boat on the Linda Esperanza.
Oh my goodness! So you obviously had been down there many times. You kind of knew the lay of the land, and you probably knew your role in why God was sending you down there. I don't know if you remember that day, but it was on the third day when we were down there, and that morning you had told me go get in the boat, and because we were going to go to some homes across the river, and like we did the previous 2 days.
Right.
And you had gotten in that boat, sat down, and then you stood right back up. Do you remember that?
Somewhat.
And I thought to myself, well, what is he doing? And you got up and you stepped out of that boat, and I said, did you forget something? And you said, no, you got this. And I remember the panic that came over me, because I thought I did not have anything.
Right.
I didn't have anything, and I didn't want you to leave.
Right.
And you said, no, you got this. You handle it on your own.
Amen. And that, Chris, a lot of people call me a pain because in that situation, it's very tender-hearted to all people, because you're on an international mission trip, and then a leader puts you in a position where you're terrified. But to trust that man that's the leader, he's getting connected with God, he sees the ability that you had in interacting with the villages, that he knew that God said, this is his chance. Ricky, if they gets upset and mad at you, so be it. I'm ready for Chris to grow. Put him on the boat.
We can laugh at it now, but I remember that moment that I was terrified, and I did not understand really what was going to happen and what was happening. And so after you left, the boat driver, we went across that river to a small home, and I remember getting out of the boat, and I remember sinking into the mud really deep in front of that house and walking across this rickety plank into their house and just thinking the whole time, what is going to happen? I mean, I was still terrified at that point, and walking into that house, I was greeted so warmly by the Brazilians there. So, and then, at that very moment when that woman looks at me and she sees that I'm this big, sweaty American, and she asks me if I'm thirsty, and then she goes ahead and takes these 2 glasses of water and walks back out into the front of her home, dips them, and hands me a cup, and hands my translator, Nelson Campos, another cup of water. And I'm sitting here looking at this water that she just took out of the river, and not knowing what to do. And again, there's these times in life, I think, when you have some decisions to make that are going to be dramatic in what happens in the future. And this was one of them where I thought, well, if I drink this, I'm going to get sick. Or if I don't drink it, she's going to think I'm rude. And I remember looking out of the corner of my eye to Nelson, and he was doing this, don't drink it.
Right.
So I sat there and held it the whole time. And that's really where God started to breathe life into this ministry.
Amen.
And he started to wrap his arms all around me and focus my attention on the fact that these people have to drink that water.
And Chris, you know, I've heard that testimony, and it's worthy to be heard over and over again. One of the things that really touched my heart out of that, but this woman was giving out of her best. She was giving out of what she had.
Yeah.
And you was faced with, let me just hold on to the water, even though the guy on the boat, you know, for her safety tells you don't drink it, but you held it, you know what I mean? And she respected that, and whether we get to see her again, she'll never forget that you didn't spit it out and you didn't tell her no. So I think God honored that first deal when he planted it into your heart to even have a vision for this ministry. I think that was one of the springboards that God used.
Wow. And, you know, it's so clear to me now, but I remember at the time, I didn't quite understand what he was showing me, right? And so as we talked to this family, we learned that they had 9 children, and that 8 of them knew the Lord, and 1 of them was separated and did not have a relationship with Jesus. And I remember before we left that we asked them if there's anything we could pray for them for. And this little Brazilian man that came up to maybe about here on me, because he was pretty short, he started crying. And it wasn't just a little sniffle, it was kind of a big, ugly cry. And he grabbed onto me, and I asked my translator, what's he saying? Because he was talking really quick. And at that point, Nelson said, you won't believe what he's saying. He's saying that he's been praying to God to send somebody here to his home for 2 years to pray over his family and over this child that did not know the Lord, and here you are today.
Praise God. See there?
So, you know, that happened, and I remember afterwards I went back to the boat that night, and we all talk at the end of the night what happens in the villages, and I think that is such a powerful time that we can start to remember what's happened of the day, and we can start to record some of these stories and testimonies.
Right.
And I just at that point, I still don't think I fully understood God's plan for this, and I just thought it was a remarkable day, and I thought I was blessed to be part of it. And then I remember we went through the whole rest of the trip, and we got to the end of the trip. And this part is the part that is, like the first part wasn't remarkable. This next part for me is so touching to my heart, and this is where I think God really spoke through you. And I don't even know if you knew at that point what you were saying. As we were getting off the boat, you gave me this great big hug, and you whispered something in my ear. And that whisper is something that I'll never, ever forget. And it was 3 words, and those 3 words have become really the cornerstone of the bucket ministry. And do you remember what those 3 words were?
I sure do. I live by them 3 words.
Yeah.
Tell it well.
And you know, when you whispered that in my ear, I had no idea what that meant. And when I got home, I had a lot of supporters, a lot of people that were involved in me going, that said, hey, tell me how your trip was. And every time I told them about the visit in that home that day and how you forced me out of my comfort level, and then how God spoke through you at the end of this, to be able to share the story over and over and
Amen.
over. And so for anyone involved in this ministry, anytime we talk, we always refer to tell it well. And we like to call ourselves storytellers
I do too.
because
Right.
we believe that a story that's well told glorifies God, and it will help engage other people to get involved in missions.
Right.
Doesn't necessarily have to mean they have to hop on a boat in the Amazon River, but if they just pray for the people that are going.
Exactly. And there's reference that I set my life by that, Chris, and the ones that are listening, is that in the Gospel of Luke, the 2nd verse, he says, I'm recording only what eyewitnesses went through. So when you look at the Gospel of Luke, he's talking to John the Baptist's daddy, and his daddy's got an opportunity if somebody's wanting to hear the story, so Zachariah telling the story well. When you go through there, they're telling the story well. So there might be a Luke that wants to know what's going on with the bucket ministry, and it's time that you need to step out of the comfort zone and just. But it's not a struggle for you to tell the story now.
Right.
But it might be for them new believers that's come along, them new ones that's wanting to partner with it. I can't do it. But if we tell the story well, because Christ is worth every bit of it, and the life changes that it does. You know, I'm talking about it changes lives. So I thank you as a pastor. I thank you as a board member of the Revival on the River. I thank you as a human being for stepping out of that comfort zone and seeing what God has took the Beth family, because y'all been on my prayer list and always been on my prayer list, but when you committed to go into this ministry full time, it just brought it up a little extra notch. So you got our support for the bucket ministry and for Chris and Sherry Beth and your family.
Well, I thank you so much for that, and I really want to thank you for that first trip, because how God worked through you and engaged me in this has changed me at such a core level that there's often days I look in the mirror and I don't even recognize myself anymore. And the changes have been so dramatic that I think that hopefully by telling it well and sharing the changes in my own personal life and sharing what God has done in developing this ministry,
Right.
that will engage other people to want that same sort of relationship and want to have that same sort of commitment in their life to something much bigger than themselves.
Right.
So
That's awesome.
thank you so much, Ricky.
Boy, you're welcome, buddy.
Love you.
Love you. God bless you.
Thank you.